Hello, great and bountiful YouTube empire. I'm back, kinda. I'll be honest, I wasn't really expecting this to be my return. I've got some projects in the works, but they're far from ready to be presented yet. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm still on hiatus. With that said, I have a lot on my mind, and these are things I've been thinking about for a while now. And given the recent trends in the Ahsoka show on Disney+, I think it's now time I discuss what's been on my mind. My disclaimer today is that this is merely a theory. Initially, it was one I only had a vague belief in, but the more I thought about it, the more things started to make sense to me. I think I've reached a point where this will either be the most insane off-base idea ever, or it's exactly correct. There is no in-between. And I'm ready to make a fool of myself for the sake of pride.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
I'm not going to be putting a ton of effort into this video. I just want it to be a quick and easy brain dump, nothing flashy, and I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. The core of this theory, as it relates to Ahsoka, is based heavily on a pre-existing fan theory that I briefly skimmed over in a single article and then proceeded not to read any details or information about outside of the basic premise. I have not been involved in the discourse or done any deeper research on this topic besides what I already know and have observed. So, who knows? Maybe this video won't be unique at all and everyone's saying the exact same thing I am. I guess we'll see. Finally, a mild spoiler warning for Star Wars Rebels, the Force Unleashed games, a tiny bit of Clone Wars, The Mandalorian, the original Thrawn trilogy, and the first 2 episodes of Ahsoka. With all that out of the way, let's get started. The theory I'll be presenting in this video is threefold. This is the first fold. The core of my theory, as it relates to the Ahsoka series, is based on the fan theory that the mysterious new Inquisitor seen in the show is actually Ezra Bridger himself. When I first heard this theory, I was on the fence. It's such an obvious theory, almost on par with everything is a dream theories and garbage like that. Of course, the moment there's an unknown masked villain alongside a missing character, people are going to assume, or in many cases predict, that they are actually one and the same. And as I mentioned before, I didn't bother to read any deeper, particularly because I actually read this theory just prior to watching the show, and had been trying to avoid spoilers myself. After watching the first 2 episodes, I was even more surprised. Given that there were theories of him being Ezra already, I figured he'd have played a larger role. They were even referring to him by name, despite his name not having been uttered in either episode, at least not that I remember. His name, of course, being Marrok, a name which already sparks some neurons in my brain, but I'll get to that later. Okay, minor update that changed my trajectory a little. I was checking IMDb to make sure his name wasn't listed on there. It's not. And I ended up stumbling across confirmation that people are talking a little bit about the next part of my theory. So rather than waiting like it's some big surprise, I'll go ahead and address it now. Plus, I'm sure anyone who was already thinking about it figured it out as soon as I gave a spoiler warning for The Force Unleashed. The name Marrok was interesting to me in particular, because I happen to know that Starkiller, the protagonist of Star Wars' The Force Unleashed series, his real name is Galen Marrok. Admittedly, it's spelled differently with 1 R and an E rather than 2 R's and an O, but it's close enough. So, just to kind of reset and review where we're at in this theory, it's been posited that this new Inquisitor, Marrok, could be Ezra Bridger, or he could be the Disney version of Starkiller from The Force Unleashed. He could also just be some random schmuck, but at this point that seems a little bit unlikely. Now, one thing I know is that Dave Filoni, the writer of Ahsoka and really most of the best modern Star Wars content, at one point mentioned trying to get Starkiller into the Rebels series, but couldn't fit him into the story they were telling. Furthermore, honestly, just a few minutes ago when I was double-checking my source on that last note, apparently Sam Witwer, the actor who originally portrayed Starkiller, though you may be more likely to recognize him as the voice of Darth Maul, recently had a discussion with Dave Filoni about Starkiller. So, in my eyes, that basically confirms that Marrok is most likely to be Starkiller. But that doesn't mean that this theory is open and shut just yet. We're only at the tip of the iceberg, and there's still plenty more I want to discuss. But I think you've heard enough about the base theory. I think we're going to move on to the second fold. Before I start, I just want to say that I'm a huge fan of Sam Witwer, and I'd love to see him reprise his role as Starkiller in live action. But even with that said, I'd still say it's about a 50-50 chance, because this is where my theory starts to go beyond just Marrok could be Ezra or Starkiller. Because what if I said Marrok could be Ezra and Starkiller?
This is where the fun begins.
Okay, I'm going to need to back that claim up, obviously. And this is going to be the main meat of this video, I think. Even outside of my current theory, I'd have been willing to make a video on this content alone, because it excites me a lot and it's one of my favorite aspects of Rebels. and also the dynamic of Ahsoka and Anakin in general. Things are going to get a little complicated, and it's going to pull from a lot of different places, but I'm just going to dive right in. Ezra is Starkiller. Sounds crazy, right? There's a lot to say, so I'll just go into some comparisons and contrasts. Real quick though, I want to also say that I'm going to be including Ahsoka in this, almost as if she and Ezra are a dynamic duo, or even a dyad if you will, for reasons I hope will make sense once I've finished. We'll start with Starkiller. Starkiller was a Sith assassin and the secret apprentice of Darth Vader. In his first game, he wielded a single lightsaber and heavily favored fighting with a reverse grip. In his second game, he upgraded using 2 lightsabers and again favored the reverse grip. Minor note here, but relevant later, it's worth noting that he was killed in the canon ending of the first game and returned as a clone in the second game. At the behest of Darth Vader, Starkiller gathered together all the separate rebel forces and basically single-handedly created the Rebel Alliance. The Rebel Alliance emblem was the crest of the House Marrok, Starkiller's family crest. He fought alongside General Rom Koda, an ex-Jedi Master with a slight samurai motif, who was blinded by Starkiller himself. Alongside his pilot and love interest, Juno Eclipse, Starkiller was sent on covert missions on his ship, the Rogue Shadow. With his design based mostly on Sam Witwer and the social angst of the late 2000s, he sports a short buzz cut. I swear this is relevant. He was crazy powerful in the Force, like to the point where people actually got mad about it. I have a personal theory on why he was so powerful, but I may have to save that for another video. I'll try to touch on it here, though, if I can. He was killed, rescuing the leaders of the Rebel Alliance from the Emperor and Darth Vader, and he became a martyr. So, that's more or less who Starkiller is. Now let's continue with Ezra and Ahsoka. Ahsoka was a Jedi Padawan and the not-at-all secret apprentice of Anakin Skywalker. In her first season, she wielded a single lightsaber and heavily favored fighting with a reverse grip. In later seasons, she upgraded using 2 lightsabers and again favored the reverse grip. While fighting the threat of Darth Vader, Ahsoka came into contact with Ezra Bridger, and alongside the crew of the Ghost, they gathered together all the separate Rebel forces and basically single-handedly created the Rebel Alliance. The Rebel Alliance emblem was a modification of the Rising Phoenix crest created by Sabine Wren, a member of the Ghost crew, Ezra's found family. Ezra and Ahsoka fought alongside Kanan Jarrus, an ex-Jedi with a vague samurai motif, who was later blinded by Darth Maul as a direct result of Ezra's choices. Alongside the crew of the Ghost, Ezra and Ahsoka went on covert missions to help the rebellion. Notably, Ezra had long hair in early seasons of Rebels. However, by Season 3 he had cut his hair into something short and somewhat resembling Starkiller's buzz cut. Ahsoka is crazy powerful in the Force. Although she hasn't been shown to be quite as strong as Starkiller, it's worth noting that there has been significant emphasis on Ahsoka shifting symbolically, if not literally, into the role of the Sister, one of the Mortis gods and the physical manifestation of the light side of the Force. In case anyone still wasn't sure why that convoy was always following Ahsoka around. Ezra vanished, saving Lothal, and by extension the Rebel Alliance from Thrawn, becoming a martyr in the process. The story of Ezra Bridger and the Rebels, while a very different story from that of The Force Unleashed, treads the same water. I know this theory is about Ezra, but I'm going to set him aside for a moment to briefly discuss a topic that should honestly be its own video. But I firmly believe that Ahsoka and Starkiller are 2 sides of the same coin. They are the same person, but on the opposite spectrums, like a dyad in the Force. Ahsoka is the light side, and Starkiller is her equal opposite, the dark side. Like I said, this is technically a separate theory, but just to get your brain juices flowing, I'm not suggesting that Ahsoka and Starkiller are just any random dyad in the Force. I'm saying that they are the dyad. They are the children of balance, the children of the Chosen One. Figuratively speaking, obviously, neither of them are blood related to Anakin, but you get the idea. The Mortis gods, the physical manifestation of the Force, the Father, the Daughter, the Son, and the Mother, Abeloth. Oh, you thought there were only 3? Sorry, that last one kind of slipped in there. Still waiting for her to be recanonized. Abeloth aside, Filoni's major projects each contain references to the Mortis gods, which I'm certainly happy to see. They're some of my favorite aspects of the Star Wars canons. The Father, Anakin, representing balance, the Daughter, Ahsoka, representing the light side, and the Son, in this case Starkiller, representing the dark side. By now, if you've been following Ahsoka's journey across all her appearances, this shouldn't be too hard to sell. Though, maybe you're still skeptical about Starkiller, especially since he's been decanonized for such a long time. If it helps, though, did I mention that Sam Witwer also happens to voice the Son?
I think not!
And for all the Starkiller naysayers out there, I'm confident in saying that's why he's so insanely powerful. So, there's your answer for that question. Anyway, this is supposed to be about Ezra being Starkiller, which brings me to the third fold. My biggest problem with both the base theory of Ezra is Marrok, and even my own theory of Ezra is Starkiller, is the question of why is he an Inquisitor? I mean, I know the Sith have their ways, and many Jedi have been turned into Inquisitors. There doesn't really need to be a strong reason as far as Star Wars is usually concerned on these matters, and Ezra has toyed with the dark side on occasion in the past. Still, based on how his story ended, I wondered if it would even make sense for Ezra to turn to the dark side, especially after all he's been through. As I pondered this, I happened to be listening to the original Thrawn trilogy, partially in preparation for this show and the return of Thrawn, but also because of all the statements and rumors and things floating around the movie Dave Filoni has been working on. Based on what I've heard, I have no idea what to expect, but I know at one point there were rumors that his movie was going to be called Heir to the Empire. After some quick double-checking, I'm seeing that that particular rumor may have been debunked, but whether it's true or not, the damage has been done. Anyway, Heir to the Empire is the title of the first book of the original Thrawn trilogy, but that's not the book I'm going to be bringing up here. I'm actually going to be mentioning The Last Command, the third book in the Thrawn trilogy. Admittedly, I haven't finished reading the book at the time of recording, but what I do know is that there's a significant part of the story involving Thrawn working with a cloning project. I'm familiar enough with the Legends canon to know that this would eventually culminate in the clone of Palpatine being created, but the end goals aren't necessarily relevant to this theory. But it's interesting, isn't it? Maybe a little obvious, but do I need to say more? I will anyway for anyone who isn't completely caught up. We, of course, recently saw pieces of this very cloning project in the Disney Plus series The Mandalorian. It was a major plot that the Imperial Remnant were attempting to use Grogu to make Force-sensitive clones. Stop me if you've heard this before. I'll go ahead and stop, because I've heard this before. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2. After his death in the canon ending of the first game, Starkiller returns, this time as a clone of the original Starkiller.
Is that what Vader told you?
Yes?
And not just a clone, but the first successful Force-sensitive clone.
No one can clone Jedi. It's never been done.
With all that in mind, it made me think. It might be easier to manipulate a clone into turning into the dark side. In fact, now that I think about it, I was about to say it's not like they have the memories of the original, but then I remembered that was exactly the specific problem they had on Force Unleashed 2. They were trying to control Starkiller, but couldn't because he somehow managed to regain the original Starkiller's memories.
They are memories of a dead man, a side effect of the cloning process and the memory flashes used to train you.
The game became a story of identity as Starkiller fought his way across the galaxy to find Juno Eclipse, the girl he remembered he loved, and also grappled with his identity of being a clone. All of this is to say, Ezra may have won the battle when he removed Thrawn from the equation back at the end of Rebels, but that doesn't mean he won the war. Clearly, Thrawn is still around. I'll stop beating around the bush. For my Ezra is Starkiller theory, I think it's possible that Marrok is a clone of Ezra that was manipulated by the Empire, maybe even Vader or the Emperor himself, though I don't want to speculate too far, and turned to the dark side. Just like what happened with Starkiller's clone. So, is Marrok actually Ezra in the role of Starkiller, or is he really just Galen Marrok, the original Starkiller, fully imagined for Disney canon, and not Ezra at all? I'm honestly not entirely sure, but regardless of the answer, I'm excited to see how things play out. Only time will tell.
Quick last-minute update here at the end of the video. I'm still mulling over some of the aspects of this theory in my head, but I just wanted to note that as I was collecting assets for the Last Command comic, particularly any visual relating to the cloning stuff I mentioned, I happened to spoil myself by stumbling across the end of the book where I found two interesting details I wanted to add to this. One, note the extremely similar imagery of Sabaoth doing something very nearly identical to when the Emperor attacked Ezra and Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds. I still haven't finished the book, unfortunately, so I don't know exactly what's going on here in the comic. I was just skimming for visuals. And two, I just wanted to note that it seems in this specific case, the cloning thing led up to the creation of a clone of Luke Skywalker being made, which Luke then had to fight. Some other minor notes include the fact that I forgot to mention that Ezra is the exact same age as Luke, born on the same day, which may or may not be relevant, but, this is kind of a loose thread. I'm hesitant to even call it a thread, but I did also want to make a galaxy-brain note of the fact that Rebels was heavily inspired by the original Ralph McQuarrie concept art for Star Wars, which was made particularly featuring Luke Starkiller. And with the introduction of Jacen Syndulla, I had previously begun to view the Ghost Crew as something of a reassigned Solo family, like where Ezra is Anakin Solo, Sabine is Jaina Solo, and Jacen is Jacen, etc. But after some of what I've uncovered today, I'm starting to see it in a way that maybe makes a bit more logical sense, something closer to Ezra being Luke Starkiller, Sabine being more in the role of, say, Leia, etc., but only time will tell. I just hope we see an Alana Syndulla someday. Also, apparently Sam Witwer was credited in the Ahsoka show. He's listed under additional voices, which is interesting. It could mean nothing, or it could mean everything. But at least we know for sure that he's in the show. Alright, last thing, I swear, but I also just wanted to note that I forgot to mention that aside from several other visual and thematic similarities, Kanan and Coda also have the exact same hairstyle. So, there's that too.
If you made it to the end, then thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, or at least appreciated, this little theory of mine, and I hope to see you again soon. This is Chiin Ferno, signing off. Got a bunch of dust in my hair from wearing that mask. I should have dusted it off before I put it on. I am having a lot of trouble getting this helmet on, mostly due to my hair, which, kind of makes sense, but let's see if I can figure this thing out. Well, good enough. Furthermore, right now I can't get this thing off. Surprisingly, this is the most uncomfortable mask of all of them. See, it's got this awkward pin thing, and it keeps the Velcro keeps snagging on my hair. This was made for a project that never got finished. I really wish you guys could have seen that, but
ba do da do de.